towards the end of the 19th century, another country was beginning to be in ascendancy militarily, economically, and certainly culturally, and especially in music composition, and that was Russia. And in fact, I'm not making this stuff up about kind of, this nationalistic tendency. There were a group of 5 Russian composers that actually called themselves explicitly the Russian Five. And they were Cesar Cui, Modest Mussorgsky, Emily Balakirev, Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov, and Alexander Borodin. We're going to talk about 2 of those composers, Mussorgsky and Rimsky-Korsakov, although all 5 of them wrote wonderful music. Rimsky-Korsakov was kind of the ringleader. He was is it the Moscow Conservatory? He was teaching at some conservatory, and he became very well known for his treatises and expertise on orchestration, or how you deploy the instruments of a symphony to create your music. In fact, his book on orchestration was still used up until quite recently. Actually, people still use it today, reading what he had to say about how you pit trumpets against violins and, woodwinds against percussion. And his music was very, very flamboyant with lots of percussion. Again, that kind of going after that exotic flair. And they were also in opposition to probably Russia's most famous composer of that era, Peter Tchaikovsky. We'll talk about him in a second. But anyhow, let's talk about, first of all, Rimsky-Korsakov. He was born in a small town east of St. Petersburg. Let me write him down, okay. Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov. Okay, and he lived from 1844 to 1908. Had a pretty good life. And he studied composition, but he also, all these guys, they seem to also have careers in the military. That's probably how they paid their bills. Came from a very aristocratic family. That was also expected, that if you're a Russian aristocrat, you're probably involved in the military too. And just wrote some marvelous pieces of music. I'm going to play you one of my favorites. This is a piece he wrote called Scheherazade. And again, this is in quest of the exotic. It's based on the 1001 Night, the tales of Aladdin, and the stories that Scheherazade told to keep from getting killed. And I'm going to play the beginning of this. And this is Aladdin on the sea. And you'll hear his depiction of the sea with the swells of the strings. Again, this is that what I was talking about earlier, program music. This is music that actually is explicitly set to kind of depict or represent something. So here is the beginning of Scheherazade. Again, extended tonality. He's drawing on different musical traditions for some of his modulations. And then this solo violin part, that's the voice of Scheherazade as she tells these stories to the Sultan. these are those strings I told you about, the swells of the ocean. It's just glorious music. Even the way he's like having the violins go like that, it's like he's dragging this music out of the primordial whatever. It's just great music. Listen to this stuff. I love this music. For a long time, I wished I'd been born Russian so I could be like these guys. But anyhow, so that's Rimsky-Korsakov. Again, go on the website. There's other examples of his music. It's just beautiful stuff. But I want to talk about Modest Mussorgsky a little bit. Okay, Modest MUSS. Again, these spellings are from the Cyrillic, so you'll see his name spelled in different ways. But he lived from 1939 through 1839, excuse me. Yeah, 1839 through 1881. Notice he didn't live that long. We'll talk about that in a second. But he wrote some, just again, very passionate music. And this music does have a Russian quality to it, that drama, that bigness. You can hear, the soul of the Russian people, for lack of a better term. And this is a piece that he wrote called Night on Bald Mountain. And it's based on a Russian folk tale of the witches' Sabbath, just before All Saints' Day. And again, if you've ever seen Fantasia in Disney, you'll see a very strange version of this depicted with the demons coming out and all the people praying. But I'll play the beginning of this because it's pretty exciting music. Yeah, so you'll hear, again, that's kind of a bad excerpt. Something's wrong with the recording here. But go on the website, listen to this. This also has made it into a few car commercials, showing how exciting the car is. But very dramatic, very, very overt music. But probably his best known work is a piece called Pictures at an Exhibition. Again, this is most definitely a piece of program music. It depicts a good friend of Mussorgsky was a painter who died very young. And this was an exhibition of his paintings posthumously, shortly after his death. And it depicts Mussorgsky going around to each of the pictures and writing a little piece about the picture. But he also had this melody called the Promenade, which is cast in different ways, showing different moods of Mussorgsky as he went through this exhibition. Now I'm going to play you a version that was orchestrated by a later composer, Maurice Ravel, in the 1900s. Mussorgsky originally wrote this for piano and had intended to do an orchestration of it, but he died earlier. So here's the Promenade theme, and again, it's just wonderful. Yeah, that's great. Here is another version of it, though. This is after he's seen a picture and he's wandering to the next one, and he plays this. Much more introspective. Just love the way he sets the melody in different contexts. Here's yet another. And here's one that's much more introspective and very melancholy in a way. So he scattered these kind of promenade pieces throughout this, again, depiction of the pictures. And here's a few of those. This is a picture called The Hut on Fowl's Legs. And this is also based on a famous Russian folk tale of this witch that lived in this weird house that cruised around, and she grabbed naughty children and ate them, typical kind of thing. But here's how Mussorgsky depicted that picture. And here's another one, a bit more lighthearted, called The Ballet of the Chickens in Their Shells. Apparently the picture was of these chicks just getting hatched. And here's Mussorgsky's version of it. Yeah, so very, very lighthearted. And the final picture, the ending piece in this suite of pieces, is called The Great Gate of Kiev. And I'm going to play a fair amount of this because this is just amazing music. Yeah, that was one of those that I used to play at the end of the semester when finals were over. Yeah, it's just a wonderful piece. Okay. Now, I'm not going to say too much about Mussorgsky's life. It was unfortunate and sad. He also came from a very wealthy family, just south of St. Petersburg. All these guys kind of congregated in St. Petersburg because that's where the heart of Russian culture was back then. Came from a very wealthy family. Also did military service, but also developed a serious drinking habit. And he actually died from acute alcohol poisoning when he was about 40 years old or so. Really tragic because he was just a fabulous composer. Um, yeah, and there's more to him than that. I want to talk about it in our Zoom meeting that we have. Interesting, well, maybe not so interesting stuff, kind of not so good stuff. Anyhow, I want to talk about one more Russian composer in this segment, and that's Peter Ilyich Tchaikovsky. And he lived from 1840 to 1893. He was born in a small town in central Russia. He was a sort of a sickly child, a bit like Chopin in that respect. Had kind of a not so happy childhood. He showed very precocious musical talent. His father wanted to nip that in the bud, sent him to boarding school while he was away at boarding school. I think he was sent to boarding school when he was 7 years old. His mother died of cholera. Then his father brought him back, sent him, when he got older, to become a lawyer at some imperial school of jurisprudence. And Tchaikovsky just was, he wanted to be a musician. And ultimately, he did wind up going to the St. Petersburg Conservatory, where he studied with the founder, Anton Rubinstein. And this is what's interesting. The conservatory at St. Petersburg was very much European looking. It was very Eurocentric. The Russian Five were counter to that and wrote, again, it's kind of like these guys wrote articles all the time, kind of slamming each other. They very much despised the education that happened at the conservatory, and by association, Tchaikovsky. So Tchaikovsky left Russia, and he got married. Everybody pretty much agrees that he was a homosexual. Marriage did not go well, and fortunately, his family, the one that wanted him to be a lawyer, was actually very supportive of him and allowed him to, begin to pursue his life as a composer. But then he got really, really lucky. He didn't meet. A woman heard his music, Nadezhda von Meck, and just thought he was the greatest composer ever. Felt like she had heard her soulmate. So she started writing to him. Now it turns out she was the widow of this big railway magnate in Russia. So she was fabulously wealthy. And she'd heard that Tchaikovsky was needing support. So she said, "I will support you." Tchaikovsky said, "Oh, that's marvelous." And then they both agreed that their love was so pure that they should never meet. So, Tchaikovsky had it good. He had all this money coming in and didn't really have to do much for it. But they did do weird things, like she would check into a room in a hotel and then check out, and he would check in that night so that he could, absorb her essence or whatever. But in any case, it allowed him to write some fabulous music. You probably heard it. All of us have probably heard the Nutcracker Ballet around the holiday seasons. Swan Lake is another famous. He wrote a number of ballets. He wrote a lot of music. I'm going to play one piece in particular and go through, again, this music was highly programmatic. Ballets obviously were programmatic. I want to go through one that we've all heard, probably. It's called The Solemn Overture of 1812, or what we just know as the 1812 Overture. And this is played in the United States, especially on the 4th of July, which is kind of weird that we play a Russian hymn to the Russian triumph over Napoleon's army as part of our Independence Day celebration. But anyhow, you'll recognize a lot of this. And again, what it does, it depicts the defeat of Napoleon's army and the fortitude of the Russian people in standing up to his army and, driving him back. And, that was kind of the end of Napoleon's big adventure. Anyhow, it starts out with this. So this is actually, Tchaikovsky actually uses real music. Real music. He uses real pieces that had currency in the culture as part of his narrative for this. This is actually a Russian Orthodox hymn, the Troparion of the Holy Cross. Every Russian alive would know this music. So this is depicting the strength of the Russian people right at the outset. Okay, but as it goes along, you start hearing things begin to happen. And here we go. All of a sudden, something's happening. So you can hear he's using tension. He's using minor keys to depict, strife is beginning to develop. Napoleon's army has been sighted, but despite even being sighted, this happens. Yep, the Russians are rallying. That's God save the Tsar. But you better watch out, because just over the hill is this. Yep, it's the Marseillaise, the French national anthem, because those Napoleon guys are there. They're coming in. All right, so what has to happen? Well, the Russians need to contemplate. The Tsar needs to appeal to his people to stay firm and stay strong. Yeah. And in fact, the people respond to the Tsar's appeal, and they show how just gosh darn good in Russian they are, because they do this. They stage a Russian folk dance. Yes, Napoleon, you may be coming, but we dance. We don't care. We can withstand you. But here it comes. The battle is joined. Hear fragments of the Marseillaise. Oh my. Fragments of God Save the Tsar. Oh my. And we're going to go through this. Things are going to happen. The Russian people still prevail. And then finally, there's this great moment starting here where it sounds like the Russians are going to win. And the Russians triumph. Yay! Yay! And you go into this huge long descent, and I'm going to run it ahead because it is huge and long. And finally hear this. And you can hear God Save the Tsar, and you hear those bells in the background. That was actually written in the score, that the bells of the city where the piece was performed were to be rung at that point in time. So outside the concert hall, you're hearing these bells going, and then he's going to really nail home God Save the Tsar. So they're celebrating. They've won. Everything is glorious. And in fact, it's so glorious that here's the last presentation of God Save the Tsar, and listen to what Tchaikovsky has coming in. Here they come. Now that's an ending. I wanted you to hear there's these big booms. You might think it's a big drum, but it's not. Actually written in the score are cannon. You're supposed to shoot off the cannons at that point in time to the music. And you'll see this done by the Boston Symphony Orchestra on the 4th of July. They'll shoot those cannons, by golly. And I have a great story to tell you about this, but I'm going to do it during our class period. We're going to wind up with just a few more composers as they kind of try to find other alternatives for the tonal system starting to kind of fall apart. So stay tuned.